It's no secret that Persona 5's anime is not very good. At the very least, it's on the line of the poor to awful anime adaptations of video games, at least in my opinion. And that probably doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of people. I mean, anime adaptations of video games have historically not been that good. That said, back when this was airing, I felt like my expectations were not that far up. For one, I don't watch that much anime, and for two, Persona 4 the animation was actually a pretty good recreation of the original game. Anyways, I recently rewatched the entire anime, including the 2 Dark Sun episodes that I didn't watch in my first viewing. And I kinda want to talk about it.
Huh? Kidding? No, this is all real.
While the anime itself has a myriad of problems, the one I want to focus on, at least for this segment, is the main plot. The main story of Persona 5 is summarized in this. It's not retold. It skips a lot of minor plot points and leaps to the significant ones in order for the viewer to just barely understand what's going on. Usually in shows, an info dump is accompanied by visuals to assist in the learning process. Unfortunately, in P5A, the info dump in the beginning, that is core to understanding how palaces work, is shoved into a montage of the Phantom Thieves reaching Kamoshida's palace's end, which highlights another problem. The palaces are not utilized much at all. I understand it's difficult to put a lot of gameplay into anime form, but it's usually a bunch of barely animated shots slapped together covering a few major pieces of the palace. It's rare that a palace is shown or used for anything at all, and anything that isn't needed for the main plot is just usually not shown. And I understand that animating this entire palace sequence when it's not really necessary is kind of just too much work to do, especially for probably how much budget and resources this show was given. But again, this is a problem that even appears in other anime forms of video games, where a lot of the action scenes that would be shown as gameplay in the actual game are not used because they're not necessary to convey the main story. In the end, the actual issue is that the anime is barely one season. Even if you also count the runtime for the 2 Dark Sun special episodes and the Proof of Justice OVA, this is about 31 episodes long. And you might say, well, 26 episodes work for P4, so why not P5? Well now, I wonder why that wouldn't work. Beats me. To be frank, Persona 4's anime works because it's condensing significantly less dialogue. Those 26 episodes, while they didn't fully adapt the social links, did a good job condensing them into a form that still worked. P5 has a lot more dialogue, story, and characters to cover in its main story. And then you have to push to incorporate the confidants, who are a little more integral, and not always as easy to condense since the story takes place in a big city as opposed to a small rural town. So the core issue winds up being that the anime's just kind of too short for what Persona 5 is.
Aw, thanks. I've been really working these abs. Wait, what?
Now, there are some things that I did like. Not a lot, but I've got some stuff here and there. A lot of it is concepts, and not the actual execution. I'd love the sci-fight if it wasn't so weirdly animated in some spots. I mean, that Seth laser is... I like the conflict scene in the Okumura arc just a little bit more. It's not perfect, but it highlights Ryuji's good points, while in the main game he partially just seems like he's being an ass on purpose in certain areas. I think if this anime was your first experience with P5, the ending is absolutely the best cliffhanger. And by that I mean the ending at episode 26. Aside from that, there are a few small comedic moments that this has that are good, and give me that good old P4A vibe. But it really doesn't do much when the rest of the anime is just bland. So strap in now, because we're going to talk about the stuff I don't like, and there's kind of a lot.
Thanks to all of you, Ooh, did you learn something new?
I'm sure you know and you've heard, but calling this the animation is generous. The animation is not that appealing. In almost any scene where characters are animated, it's a looping animation where half of them are barely moving. And sometimes there are shots that are just used, so they don't actually have to animate anything at all. Makoto could be talking in one scene, and for some reason it's a shot of Ryuji staring at an animal. What I'm trying to say here is that it's pretty obvious this project was not given a lot to work with. Beyond that, the style that Persona 5 oozes is dead. it's non-existent here. There is no style, just bland anime visuals. For a game that's so into its own comic book style, it's a shame that the anime does almost nothing at all to replicate it. You have very brief moments where it feels like it's trying to do something, but nothing really looks that good. And I did forget to mention before, but the OP and ED songs are very good. But what happened with the opening for Core 2? You're telling me that they didn't have a finished version of Dark Sun when the second core aired? There is no good reason to keep this OP hidden until episode 26 beyond this, and it feels like that's the issue. I'm pretty sure this OP is just recycling shots from the anime. Again, this is another factor where the anime is working with what they can manage, which unfortunately just means not a lot. And aside from these issues, there's a myriad of problems with the main story. For some reason, there was a decision made to alter the order of events in a lot of places. And it works sometimes, but for the most part, I still think it's to the story's detriment. A lot of the time, altering the timeline of the events is done for almost no reason. There's even moments where Akechi is just kind of involved with not much purpose. Sometimes it does work, but I still like the game's version of events more. And then there's the dialogue. Unfortunately, the dialogue is mostly rushed. A lot of scenes have the most important lines in them, but there's barely any time to breathe.
A breathtaking sight. Imitations they may be, but together they make a fine spectacle. Though the flowers of evil blossom, be it known, abominations are fated to perish! A breathtaking sight. Imitations they may be, but together they still make a fine spectacle. However, they are flowers of an evil blossom, and abominations are fated to perish.
You mock my beautiful creation!
Characters will finish talking, and the next character will start without even pausing. And that could be because I watched the show in the dub, but it's usually something that doesn't happen much with shows at all. And while the load of dialogue is stripped down, and that can help with some scenes because Persona 5 really likes its dialogue, most of the time the scenes are less impactful, less emotional, and too quick to feel anything other than a brief synopsis of the story it's trying to tell.
Yeah, right! I can't be losing my shit, like...
Okay, so changes in a vacuum are okay. Theory crafting a different reality is fun, and ultimately harmless, but please keep in mind that this is not taking into account things like deadline, budget, and staff. This is pretty much just a fun, how could Persona 5 the animation be better, and not really accounting for all the corporate side stuff. None of this is really the fault of the creative team, they're just kind of working with what they're given. So keeping that in mind, I think what would have been best for this show is 2 seasons. Persona 5 is a long story, but being able to cover all of that along with the dungeon crawling and confidants is a lot to ask of barely 30 episodes in runtime. While the split would mean the sacrifice for the ending of Season 1, since that ultimately probably be pretty deep into Season 2, you could still end an episode off like that. In general, the obvious doesn't really need to be stated. Things like improving the animation and giving the anime a sense of that Persona 5 flavor would be nice. Being able to pace out the dialogue and even having a chance to animate some more dungeon crawling and action scenes would probably help a lot.
Oh, hey guys. Good job.
It's kinda tragic that we got the anime in the form that it is, but there's not much we can really do at this point. Persona 5 the animation is just a very poor attempt at recreating Persona 5. And hopefully we're off the hook from Persona 5 Royal the animation. I don't want any of that stuff to be butchered the way that they kind of butchered this. In the end, I just wish this was more than what it was. If you haven't seen Persona 4's anime, I'd highly recommend it. It does such a fantastic job at recreating the main game's story while adding in its own flair to it to make it a really enjoyable show. This one, on the other hand, just feels like a quick, bland recreation of the main game story. It's advertisement material. I mean, that's quite literally what it is. But hey, if you disagree, you can leave a comment down below and tell me your thoughts on Persona 5 the animation. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and subscribe to the channel for more things Atlas, Persona, and JRPG related. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.